Kentaro Miura's Berserk can be confounding. Reading volumes 9 and 10 prompts Kumar and me to ask, just what genre is this comic anyway? While it still has plenty of over-the-top action and violence, it also has gratuitous sex, comedy, and even some horror elements. Our review of these 2 volumes is coming up. But first, join us for 20th Century TV and Music Trivia Quiz videos, outtakes from To the Bat Polls, and more on our Patreon page. Patrons donating $4 a month or more get access to hours of additional podcasts, including our current series on Jim Starlin's Captain Marvel work. Get all the info at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim.
And this is Kumar.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Kumar in Melbourne. Good day, eh?
Hello.
A little Great White North greeting to a Canadian who's down under. But anyway.
Yeah.
So we're resuming our walk through Berserk by Kentaro Miura. This is volumes 9 and 10. Still in the flashback. And I believe we've still got 4 more volumes after this of flashback.
And there's an embedded flashback.
Yeah, flashback within a flashback.
In here as well. A nested flashback, yeah. At one stage in these volumes. And that's not the first time that's happened.
So before we get into it, I wanted to acknowledge, so this podcast goes up on YouTube as well as in the feed. And on YouTube, we actually get some comments. On the episode where we talked about the first 4 volumes, someone named Brian just commented to remind us of Griffith's God Hand name, which is Femto. And then on our volume 7 and 8 episode, Matthias Mas Enriquez said, "Great work. Berserk is always worth talking about." And Lore Next said, "Holy shit, you guys are up for a wild ride."
Yeah.
These deserve These deserve much more attention. There can never be enough Berserk talk. Yeah, well, gee, just these 2 volumes are kind of a wild ride. I mean, like, what genre is this actually? Volume 9, There's lots of gratuitous sex. Volume 10, it's almost horror and also comedy. Like, what?
Yeah, it's all over the place. And big spoiler, I mean, as with every other previous volume of Berserk, I both loved and hated these 2 volumes. I'm like, wow, this is really so great. And then you turn the page and there's something so dumb. And then you turn the page and it's great again. And you're like, what's going on? What is this comic? Where is he going? It's a real kind of madness. And it's not like a 6-year-old doing something crazy, so writing some crazy story. And you're like, haha, that's fun. This is just like, it's very deliberate, all the things that are happening. I think everything that's happening is a choice. It's just, he's not rushing to meet a deadline or anything. I think he's planned everything out, but it's just bizarre choices left and right. And sometimes they're just great, and sometimes it's like, do I have to read more of this? But we'll get into all the details of all that stuff, because it was, something else. These 2 are something else, yeah.
So where we left off, Guts had just left the Band of the Hawk.
Oh, and by the way, before we get to that, something I don't think you've ever talked about is the cover art. And there's a kind of, I noticed on 9 and 10 especially, there's this weird textural quality to them that's hard to describe. It feels like he's painted it in a way that's like fab. It has a real weight and thickness to it, and they're really gorgeous. And another thing I noticed this time, which I don't know if we've ever mentioned through 8 volumes, maybe we did in volume 1 to 4, the sound effects are not translated. They're just left there as like graphic elements on the page with no indication. And usually it's not a problem because it's just people swinging swords and stuff. But there was a moment or 2 in this one, like when Archer's arrows are being drawn and there's a gee sound effect, which you would know means like the sound of straining of the bowstring. But they haven't translated that, so you don't know what's actually happening in this panel. It's actually significant to this arrow attack that's about to. Anyway, that minor. I just wanted to point out that we haven't mentioned, and it was I remember, I don't know when this started in translation in English, but I remember when I started at Dark Horse around 2002, 2003, 2004, there was no house style regarding sound effects. Like different editors, or sometimes the same editor would have a different approach for different books. So like one of the series I did, they would put the translations of the sound effects in the gutters between the panels. And in another, nowadays they tend to they put it right beside the graphic sound effect in the panel or something like that. And some series like this one, they'd just be like, don't bother.
Yeah.
We're not gonna do it. Blade of the Immortal was another one that I took over that series, but they were like, no, they're just graphical elements are just left in there. They almost look like a sword swipe as opposed to a sound coming out of it or something like that. So
yeah, well, it must be a lot of work to change those. I've been doing Full Metal Alchemist on Law of Equivalent Exchange, and in that one, the sound effects are all translated. And some of those took a lot of work to like take out the Japanese and put in the English.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was another approach. Some people would take out the Japanese and put in the English in some series. I think very few people do that now because it's a much more time-consuming and therefore more expensive process for the letterer to have to erase the Japanese and put in the English. Now they would usually just put the English beside the Japanese effect and leave it that way.
But yeah, Full Metal. I mean, that was translated. Well, at least the version I have was translated over a decade ago.
Right.
So I guess they were putting the time and money into it then.
Yeah.
At least Viz was on that particular title. So Guts is camping out by himself and thinking about whether he's made the right decision.
Yes, because he's left the Hawk, the band, the Hawk. Yeah.
And then something comes up behind him, and it's a skeleton military general on a horse.
Yeah.
Who gives a warning that kind of doesn't make any sense in the translation. I don't know what the Japanese said, but he warns, what I put in my notes, 1 year hence shall be the time of the eclipse. And as I read this the second time, I was noticing, so Miura is very clear about kind of when fairly clear about when the 1 year passes. We skip ahead that year within these two volumes.
That's right, yeah.
So we can note that as we get there. But this warning is very relevant within these two volumes.
Yes, and it's relevant that this is I want to get to a couple of things here. This is a skeleton on horseback in armor. So this is a major supernatural element. And we've been talking about this at length on previous episodes because we had a lot of supernatural. We went for 3 volumes of madness to normal medieval stuff, except for occasional bits and pieces. Maybe one monster shows up. A lot of that stuff starts coming back in these 2 volumes, finally.
Right. In those volumes that were in the quote-unquote present for Guts, there was all kinds of supernatural. And then we jump back in time and it's all gone. And up until I read these 2, I wasn't sure if that was intentional or just an oversight, but it's clear from these 2 volumes that it's totally intentional, and we are starting to see where all the magical stuff comes from.
Yeah, I think we're actually going to get an origin for it. I was kind of surprised by that when that came up later on, but I was very shocked by this knight showing up. And you mentioned the translation, and the translation is like, I don't know what the Japanese is like, but the translation of these 2 volumes is a bit rough. So, for example, when this creature shows up and confronts Guts with this prophecy, Guts' response, he calls it the Knight of Skeleton. So, now, I'm looking at these Japanese words, and it's just like Skeleton Knight. And also, he calls it the Knight. Now, this is a point of torture for any translator. Do I do the or ah? Like, has Guts encountered this thing before? Does he know what it is? Is it a mythical creature in their land? We don't know. But the translator has to choose an or the. Now, I would have 100% just said a skeleton knight. It's like, this is a knight, and he is a skeleton. It's a skeleton knight. I've never encountered such a thing before. What a bizarre thing to see. But the translation is the Knight of Skeleton. So strange. It's almost like your first draft. It's like your first draft on the translation or something, and you never went.
Were they trying to make it into a pun because it's nighttime?
I don't know if they were trying to make it a pun, but I would say, I'll get here. There's a lot of my translation stories coming in this episode, but
okay.
When I was working on a book for Dark Horse called Kawaii Hon in Japanese, and they were going to translate it as Scary Book. And I was looking at it going, well, this is a bit of a clumsy title. It was a horror series. I said, why don't we call it Book of Fear? That's cooler.
Mm-hmm.
And then my editor went to Dark Horse's marketing department, and marketing said, no, the kids in the malls think Scary Book is like more Japanesey or something like that. So they'd be more attracted to it than Book of Fear, which just sounds like a genuine horror novel or something like that. So maybe there's some deliberate like awkwardness around the translation. Maybe there was an anime series that already used the term Night of Skeleton or something. That's another factor that could have been at play here. I'm not sure. But it was weird that he would say the Night of Skeleton instead of just a Skeleton Night. Odd. But the translation throughout these two volumes, there's a lot of long, highfalutin speeches about dreams and stuff, which we've talked about before. But in this volume especially, what are these guys talking about a lot of time? The sentences really run-on sentences with a lot of clauses and this and that, sentence fragments.
Those parts are hard to read. I mean, the everyday dialogue is fine, but when it gets more highfalutin, it gets harder to understand. Yeah. I wanted to read, I found the page here, read what the Skeleton Knight says. So the gears have indeed begun turning. You struggler, take heed. 1 year hence shall be the time of the eclipse. You and your friends, those yet unseen of the fleshless flesh, and that unkingly half of yours shall all be gathered then in that place. A torrent of madness, a tempest of death for which the human body could never atone shall sweep over you. But take heed, struggler, you were born from a corpse and began your life from death in the mud. You are closer to death than anyone. Thus you excel in escaping it.
Yeah. Well, this is forgivable from a supernatural being, but later on, when it's just Casca or Charlotte or someone giving a speech about hopes and dreams, it becomes much more difficult to digest, I would say. Yeah.
So then we see Griffith sneaking into Princess Charlotte's room at night, and eventually they end up naked and they're doing it, which I thought, especially since this turns out to make things very bad for Griffith when the king finds out, I wondered why. I felt a little out of character for him to be so reckless.
You've hit the nail on the head. So when he snuck into a room, and it seems like he's almost going to rape her in that moment, and then she's like, no, and then she acquiesces and she accepts, and they make love. She loses her virginity in this scene. Mm-hmm. I assumed that this was part of his plotting to get to the top. He is there to make her fall in love with him completely, physically as well, as part of his rise to kingship, to kinghood, or whatever it is. That's what I assumed. But then, as he's a maid sees them through the keyhole, and Griffith jumps out the window, and then he's captured because the maid reports this to the king. He's captured by the guard. And it turns out this wasn't a part of his plan. It seemed to be something he did on impulse. And later on, it's revealed that he's kind of out of control since Guts left.
Yeah.
Like Guts was somehow keeping him emotionally or mentally grounded. And without Guts, he's kind of lost control. He's cutting loose. He's like angry, or he's going through this roiling. He's got these roiling emotions that he's going through, and he's like, "Well, I'm going to go have sex with Charlotte." Now, okay, maybe, but I don't know that Griffith and Guts' relationship was depicted to the level that we're told it is in these two volumes. In these two volumes, it's very much like these guys are so connected. That if Guts leaves, then Griffith is a mess and can't make clear-headed decisions anymore.
And Guts can't stop thinking about Griffith either.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not sure I believe that. I mean, we had lots of questions about the relationship between those two and Casca, and a lot of those are addressed here, but they're addressed. We get answers here that I'm not convinced is what was depicted in earlier volumes, if that makes sense.
Well, Griffith does. I mean, I think this was clearly Miura's plan. It wasn't something that changed later, because right after the sex, I mean, Griffith seems really kind of freaked out and almost like in a fetal position. So I think that's his intention. But yeah, it's just a little surprising given all the machinations Griffith has carried out in the past few volumes. Yeah.
Well, several volumes. I mean, he's only been with Guts for 3 years. Guts was in the Band of the Hawk for 3 years. So what about all his ambition from before? And in fact, we hear about his ambitions from childhood in this volume, in these 2 volumes. We get a bit of backstory about that. So it just seemed weird that it would be so derailed by Guts leaving that he would make this crazy decision. And why would his impulse decision be to have sex with Charlotte after Guts leaves? Why not go to a bar and get drunk or some other thing? It's just weird to make this like sexual decision. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm not sure.
Especially since he hasn't even seemed very sexual up until now. I mean, he seemed more sexual towards Guts than he did toward any woman.
And to that remember the other guy that he was trading sex for
the use of
his army. So that was critical because we know that he uses sex to get what he wants. That's why when he goes into Charlotte's window, you're like, okay, he's here to get something out of this transaction. And that's what you think is going to happen. It's absolutely not what happens. He's just there on an impulse. And then he's captured, very clumsy, to let himself get captured. So he's out of sorts. So we just have to accept it, that he's out of sorts, and he makes a couple of bad decisions here. Or, he's clumsy about the escape and the sex in the first place. He's captured. The king takes him down to the dungeons to torture him. I love the torturer that comes in. He's this really gross dude. Amazing character design. Again, every volume I'm amazed at Miura's character design. He reminded me of that character we met in volumes 1 to 3. There was a guy that was all like mutilated, but I loved him. But anyway, Griffith confronts the king and accuses the king of loving his daughter and nothing else, and all he cares about is he has a sexual interest in his daughter.
Yeah, and that feels like again like he's got a plan here, but all that ends up accomplishing is just make things much worse for him. Just gets the king angry and gets him dragged down to the dungeon and endlessly tortured. Yeah. By the way, though,
if I can
backtrack here, you're zooming through this.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, I guess in a series where we've seen so much gratuitous violence, it shouldn't surprise me. But the sex also seemed pretty gratuitous.
I deliberately zoomed back past that because I want to come back to it.
Okay.
Because we're going to talk about the king in relation to this. So I was looking at this scene. It's a very gratuitous scene. And as we said, it's a mistake. Griffith has made a mistake coming up here. He's doing it on impulse. So why do we have pages and pages and pages of this sex scene and all the moves that are happening and all this stuff? And what happens is once he's captured by the king and tortured by the king, he accuses the king of loving his daughter. This puts an idea in the king's head that maybe he does actually feel physically attracted to his daughter, I guess. I don't think he thought about it before, or he didn't, not consciously. And he goes up there.
Yeah, and Griffith makes an interesting point that she's 17 and the king has still not arranged any kind of political marriage for her, because it would be typical, for royalty of this era to marry off their kids to make alliances. Yeah. But he has not done that. And now that's an interesting idea, though. Did Griffith give the king the idea or kind of wake it up in him? Or
I think my feeling is he activated the idea. Like the king secretly, subconsciously had those feelings, and now it's been said out loud. And he goes up there to see his daughter, and he starts pulling off her clothes, and he can't help himself.
Asleep.
She's asleep? Yeah, she's asleep. And he starts, licking her breasts and all these kind of graphic things. Now, initially I'm looking at that first scene with Griffith and Charlotte and going, why is this so graphic? And I feel like it's there to counterpoint the scene with the king, which is really gross. In the first, not just because of...
Right, yeah, take a shower after reading that scene.
Yeah, not just because he's her father, but also the way he draws the king. And then, you know, when she wakes up, she kicks him in the eye a bunch of times, and like his eye's all gored and bloody and stuff. So this is a really graphically gross scene. And I think it's the reason it's grosser in contrast to seeing those kind of two beautiful bodies doing it for 10 pages, a few chapters. So maybe that was the reason. Now, does it work? Sense. Does it work? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure that it necessarily works. But I think maybe that was the intention. That was the purpose. Or maybe it's just this is just like an 80s sex and violence action movie where you just got to have a bit of both in there, you know? Exactly like you said, you pointed out, there's so much violence. Why wouldn't there be that level of, and it's not actually, I mean, it's graphic, but it's Japanese graphic. So it's like, you never see really X-rated genitals or anything like that.
Right. Everything but.
It's very shady. Yeah. Everything but, yeah. So, it's, you know, it's a couple of different things are possibly happening here. In terms of like Miura's narrative approach to having these really graphic scenes, but then we get more graphic scenes later on, which we'll talk about when we get to. So we got to balance those, got to take those into the equation as well.
Yeah. So the king sets this torturer loose on Griffith and says, you know, do whatever you want to, but don't kill him. And pointedly says, quote, however feebly he shall live another year. So here's another reference to 1 year that's about to pass. And then that's right before he goes up and tries to rape Charlotte. And, of course, Griffith still has the behelit around his neck, that Picasso egg.
Yes, which I'd forgotten that it was around his neck, or I didn't notice that's the thing he had on his necklace until we get a close-up. And because the torturer notices it.
The torturer notices it, takes it off of him, and then accidentally drops it in the sewer, and it floats away.
Yeah. And at this stage, we still don't know where it came from. Right. He bought it from a gypsy. Where did the gypsy get it? What is it? We don't know. Will we know? I'm not sure, but this volume, I thought, maybe we're going to get some backstory about this thing, because some things do happen that suggest maybe we're going to get more about the behelit itself. I certainly hope so.
Now, I think this is where the year passes. And the next thing we see is Guts in the court of some other king, and a combat tournament is going on. Oh, we forgot to mention, though, that the rest of the Band of the Hawk gets ambushed by the Midland Army.
Yeah.
And we see a bunch of arrows headed for Casca, and then we cut away.
Yeah.
And don't find out for a while what happened.
That's right.
But yeah, apparently that's when the year passes for us. And then after Guts fights this guy Silat, who's a guy wearing a turban, then he finds out from the king that Casca is now leading the Band of the Hawk. There's
some weird Orientalism.
Yeah.
In these two volumes.
Not only Silat.
To have two sets of fighters in a row that seem to come from the Middle East or India.
Yeah.
In a very exaggerated way, like Dalsim from the Street Fighter video game. Just weird characters that are like doing yogic attack kind of stuff. But we'll talk about that a bit more. But yeah, we get this fight tournament. It's okay, like whatever.
Yeah, and of course Guts wins. I mean, you just take that for granted.
No, because we know Guts we talked about this last time, we know Guts is alive in the present. So he's never in danger. The real danger is we don't know what's going to happen with Casca. We don't know what's going to happen with Griffith. Though the tension around those characters is real tension. I did get one surprise from Guts in this volume, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
But most of the time when Guts is in a fight, you're not worried about him.
No.
At all.
Yeah, especially when he gets really PO'd in the next volume. But we'll get to that too.
Yeah. So we get this whole hilarious fight with, it's very Dragon Ball Z, R.I.P. Akira Toriyama, but it's a very Dragon Ball kind of fight. I was like, what is this? All kind of crazy moves and stuff. And it's not like the medieval battles we've been having the last several volumes where it's just knights with swords.
Yeah. And I love how Guts keeps taunting Silat as being a street performer.
Yes. Yeah.
Doesn't even take him seriously.
Yeah.
Then we see the Hawks again, and of course some of them died in that attack, but
and a lot just left. A lot just quit the band.
Left, yeah. But Casca was
now they're fugitives.
With Casca's leadership, a lot of them were able to escape from that ambush, and we find out a little later that she almost died herself because she got 5 arrows in her. So we come back to them, and there's still a lot of guys who are injured, or
Yeah, and they're on the run, and the king that was holding the fight tournament is actually looking for fighters to go get rid of these bandits, which we then learn are the Band of the Hawk. Mm-hmm. Spoiler.
Yeah. Well, this is in the next chapter, we think.
Yeah.
Or not even the next chapter. Kind of at the end of the tournament chapter. He says, I'm looking for people to, take out this group of bandits. And then he says, the group that's led by this woman, Casca. Yeah. Guts looks shocked.
Yeah.
So then Silat shows up, and he's trying to take out the Hawks, and he almost cuts off Casca's head, and then Guts shows up.
Yeah. We get a bunch of, again, like, martial arts manga special moves. Like, she uses these chakram, these spinning discs, or Silat uses these spinning. I said she because Silat seems very effeminate, but anyway, he uses these spinning discs to attack, and then he has these other like weapons, like exotic weapons to attack. It seems very, it's like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure kind of stuff. Very, very odd. It seemed out of place, but maybe just because we haven't seen anything like this for the last 4 or 5 volumes.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, since he's from a different part of the world, he can bring in some different weapons, I guess, whether they're fictional or not.
Yes, but I mean, just in terms of manga narrative I feel like Miura is saying, well, we need something more visually interesting in this fight, so let's bring in this foreign fighter, this Middle Eastern turban-wearing fighter.
We've done sword fighting to death here. So.
Yeah, it seems like a conscious choice to have a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure type of battle in here.
Yeah, give Guts a different challenge.
Yeah.
And I should mention, after Guts shows up, the first page of the next chapter gives us a really great view of where everyone is situated, because we see some of the Hawks in the foreground looking into the background where Casca and Guts are, and we get the spatial relationships really nicely there.
Yeah.
I go back and forth on Miura's art because sometimes I think it's just really awesome, and sometimes I can't quite tell what's going on.
Well, I felt that during the sex scene, actually. There were certain panels where I was like, whose leg is that? What am I... is that an arm or a leg? What? Is this person upside down?
Yeah, there was a panel I can remember where I think it was supposed to be Griffith's shoulder, but it took me a while to figure it out.
Yeah.
Silat runs away. Guts is too skillful for him, but it sounds like he's going to be back later. Not in these 2 volumes, but I imagine we'll see him again. Since he's not dead, we'll probably see him again.
Yeah.
And this is where Rickard, the little kid, I don't know how old he is. He looks pretty young. He says Griffith was really depressed after Guts left, and that seems to be why he got reckless with Charlotte.
Also, Guts reveals that he's been mountain training. He's been swinging his sword on a mountain. This is a very Japanese concept. It's not a European knight thing where you go up to a mountain like a samurai and swing your sword for 5 years until you've perfected your sword strokes. This is a Japanese idea. It was very interesting. I see it creep into Japanese comics all the time that are supposedly set in medieval Europe or something like that, or some video game, role-playing game type environment, but they're the way these warriors train is in a Japanese way, in a Budo, way of the warrior type way. Yeah.
Yeah, some Japanese stuff sneaks into Fullmetal Alchemist too.
Right.
So everybody's welcoming Guts back except, the snarky guy Corcus. Says he can't
Yes.
consider someone a comrade if they were away during the worst time. Casca asks Guts to come into the woods with her, and she's angry because he left, and she's trying to kill him with her sword.
Yep.
And his leaving made Griffith weak, and she says he's no good without you. And Guts is holding onto the blade of her sword so long that his hand starts bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
And she says she's tired, she can't take it anymore. She tries to fall off a cliff again, and Guts saves her. And she says he's a fool, he always gets hurt because of her, and then they start kissing, and next chapter they're naked. In a really uncomfortable looking place to be naked, just lying on the ground in the forest.
In the dirt, in the forest. Okay, so now we get the next graphic sex scene. This, again, pages and pages and pages it goes on for. Again, Casca's a virgin. Yet again, this is the second version in this volume.
And it comes out that Guts is also a virgin.
Guts also. So he reveals what happened to him with Gambino.
But I wanted to say, I mean, they seem awfully good at having sex considering that they're virgins. I'm not quite buying it.
Yeah, I agree. So good. Well, yeah. There's a very tasteless panel after the scene where she jumps onto horseback and she gets a zing of pain in her crotch. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, did we really need to put this in here? Come on. This is going a bit too far. To really, anyway. So,
but yeah, it brings out his trauma about Gambino selling him out to that guy who raped him, and his guilt about killing Gambino, and he momentarily kind of thinks of Casca as his young self, kind of. Anyway, he starts strangling her.
Yeah.
So,
strangling her.
I mean, of course, some of this seems gratuitous, but I thought it had more meaning to the story, maybe, than the Charlotte and Griffith scene.
Okay, so again, they're nude, right? So they're both more vulnerable. It's like a visualization of their vulnerability in this moment where they make love, and then he reveals his trauma from his past. Yeah. And she reveals more about herself. That's kind of fine. But then it goes on and on and on. Like, there's more and more pages of stuff. I'm like,
yeah, we go into volume 10, they're still naked in the forest talking.
Yeah. And I also didn't like, then she's like, oh, now I understand why you used to hate being touched. And I'm like, well, that was one of the subtexts that I actually loved, that it was subtext back in volumes 1 through 4. Before the rape happens, and you see this guy that hates being touched, and when you realize why, you're like, wow, this is a deep comic book that's like really thoughtful about the way it presents his trauma, and it doesn't just say it out loud, it lets us figure it out. Well, here you go. Said out loud in this volume.
You're talking about that was subtext at the beginning of the flashback. Because I think it was definitely it was mentioned.
He doesn't like it when anyone touches him. He's like, "Don't touch me."
Yeah, it was mentioned in the present. After.
Why doesn't he like being touched?
Well, after his being raped.
Until volume 3, we don't learn, right?
Right. Okay. Before we know about it. Okay, I gotcha. All right.
We don't know about it until that, and then you're like, "Oh, now we figured out." But they never say out loud. He never says, "I hate being touched because that guy raped me." We just figure it out as an audience. We understand that. That's good writing. Suddenly we get to volume 9 and she says out loud, you hate being touched because of what that guy did to you. And I was like, what a bummer to have it just, we
know already, you don't need to tell us.
Yeah, exactly. Leave it as, subtext is what made the book smart on a level that it had like a surface level where it was this kind of action, super violent comic book. And it's like, that's fine, but actually there was a very smart thing happening under the surface. And now that I feel it's being taken away a little bit with this line and with her jumping on the horseback and having the wince of pain in her crotch. I mean, every time he does something good, like the vulnerability of them being nude and then him revealing himself while they're nude is so smart. And then to go ahead and do a bunch of dumb stuff was frustrating to me.
Coming up, comedy and horror as the magical elements we saw in the early volumes start to appear. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. Deconstructing Comics earns a bit of money from your purchase that helps us keep the show going. We really appreciate your support.
Do you like comics?
The 1960s?
How about middle-aged gay couples gossiping about their neighbors? Then you'll love Checkered Past.
A loving examination of DC's Go-Go Check branded comic magazines published from February 1966 to August 1967.
I'm Dr. Bob.
And I'm Dr. Husband.
And each week we'll be your hosts on a trippy tour through mid-century four-color madness. Checkered Past. Available wherever fine podcasts are downloaded for free.
So we get a flashback within a flashback here. Guts meeting a blacksmith and his daughter, and the blacksmith talking about how he doesn't know why he keeps blacksmithing. It's just like asking a living person why he keeps living. And Guts is thinking about how his sword is like part of his body, and it's what caused him to meet all the unforgettable people he's met. And a lot of other stuff that it's highfalutin, so it's kind of hard to follow. But
yeah.
And he wants to keep moving and fight tougher and tougher enemies. So then when we come back to him and Casca in the forest, he's saying that, that's why when once they find Griffith, he wants to move on again. He's not going to stay with the Hawks. And Casca's kind of angry about that. She says he sounds like Griffith. It's all about dreams. It's all about yourself. But he says, but for now I want to stick around. I want to have you a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, well, I can't blame him for that, I guess. But
yeah.
And then the narration tells us that 3 days before that, I'm not sure what's significant about that, but 3 days earlier, some foresters spotted a giant serpent-headed monster walking through the forest.
Yeah, it's like a cobra head. It's like a humanoid up to the neck, and then from the neck up, it's a cobra's head. It's got a giant tail. This isn't mentioned again.
Yeah, not in these volumes.
But it's like, again, a throwback to volumes 1 and 2 with all the demons and stuff running around.
And then the narration goes on, now something beyond human knowledge has begun to stir, and we see the Behelit, that we last saw in the sewer is now lying in the stream somewhere. And apparently that's the cause of...
I hope that's what it is, and it's not just a weird panel organization kind of thing. Yeah, no, because it does seem like something cool might be happening with the Behelit activating some kind of supernatural forces in the world or something like that.
And then we get Griffith's voiceover here as he's lying in his cell, thinking about how the idea of Guts is all that's keeping him alive. Like, okay.
Yeah, why? How is he alive before he met Guts?
Well, yeah, because he's had the crap beat out of him now, and he probably thinks he would die if he didn't have the idea of getting back together with Guts.
Yeah.
And then Griffith sees or hallucinates some creepy little beings. They look like misshapen fetuses.
Wait. Back up. This time I'm going to back you up. Let's talk about the scene of Griffith as a little kid growing up in a back alley between brothels and taverns where the sun never shines. And in the distance, in this alley, he sees a castle. And he decides that he wants that castle. One day I'm going to get a castle for myself. That's it. That's the whole motivation, as far as we know, for Griffith's whole life journey. All this machinations, everything, because he saw a castle and he lived in an alley and he wanted that castle. Again, I'm not sure it's enough. It's not enough of a driving force.
Well, yeah, it's not as motivational as being raped as a kid.
Yeah, and also I feel like, previous volumes we've talked about how, or I mentioned how I felt like we were getting an Alexander the Great kind of story. We were going to see the kind of charisma of a person that would lead all these other people, or, what would lead to a person wanting to be like that. But I don't think this is enough. I don't think gee, I wish I could have that cast for myself. We don't know enough about what would then make him dedicate his whole life. I mean, I might wish for $1 million, but it's
but you're not working every day to make $1 million from manga translation.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Was it enough? Kind of, maybe not. And it's very weird. His obsession with his emotions about guts are the thing that's keeping going while he's being tortured for a year. And when we see him, I mean, he's being tortured real bad. Yeah. Like real bad. It's hard to imagine. And he won't scream. He refuses to scream. It's hard to understand what about guts is keeping him alive.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I mean, it's not clear exactly what he just wants to fight alongside Guts. Guts is inspiring.
He says, in all this emptiness, have I retained my sanity? Did I go insane long ago? In all this emptiness, only one thing is vivid, only him. Like lightning on a dark night, he rises up with me blazing. And then he talks about the surging emotions. And then he says, that giant swirl of violent emotions in which none are definite but all are implied, that alone is the bond which keeps my consciousness from vanishing amidst the numbness.
Okay.
I don't know. What is it? What is that? What is that bond? I don't feel like we saw the bond in previous volumes. I feel like we saw them hang out sometimes, but I assumed that Griffith was hanging out with other of his troops as well. That he, spent time with all of them.
Yeah, it's never been quite well enough explained. And by this point, we needed something a little more, I think.
Yeah. But anyway, we have to accept it. It's what we're told in narration.
Yeah. Okay, so Griffith is lying on his cell floor and sees or hallucinates some creepy little beings that look like misshapen fetuses come out of the wall of his cell.
I assumed it was real, but you're good point. You made a good point.
He wonders if it's a hallucination. But, I mean, given that the magic is starting to happen here, it might be real.
And we see the chamber of the God Hand. So I don't think he could hallucinate that accurately without knowing what it is. On page 39, so these things crawl out. They call him Prince of Us, the Unforgiven. So they call him Prince of...
I've got the entire quote in my notes here. "O Prince of Us, the Unforgiven, we seek an audience with you. In time, at that place, we shall meet. We are kinsmen. O blessed King of Longing."
So now he's not the Prince of Us. Now he's the King of Longing. But in the King of Longing panel, we're looking down this M.C. Escher corridor, which is like the God Hand place.
Okay.
So I think this is a invitation or a foretelling from these creatures that are like, you are going to be one of us, or you're going to be one of the God Hand, is what it felt like to me in this moment.
I'm looking at that panel, and I guess I see I see now the other members of the God Hand there, kind of their silhouettes. Yeah. It's been a long time since we saw them. I'm having a little trouble remembering, but there's the one guy who's just like a head or something.
Yeah, and I think there were 5 of them.
Yeah, I see 4 people here.
There are 4.
They're That's the right. others outside of Griffith.
No, I think Griffith is going to be the 5th.
Yeah.
Because when we first met them, there were 5, I think. And now we've got 4 shadows, 4 silhouettes. And I think Griffith's going to be the 5th. And later on in the story, we hear about an ancient kingdom which was destroyed by God, who sent 5 angels. But then somebody corrects them in that story and says, no, there were 4 angels while they're telling that story. But we'll get to that. So maybe there's a connection there. I don't know. But
that makes sense.
This is the kind of stuff that I'm actually kind of enjoying. Like, I love all the buildup of how these pieces are hopefully going to fit together in a neat package, I'm hoping, because it seems all very cool stuff. I love this gross monster that crawled out. This is the stuff in Volume 1 that I really liked, and I like that we're getting back to. I was worried that we were going to have like 30 volumes before Griffith started to go over to the God Hand in some way, but here it seems like it's starting to happen already, quote unquote, in Volume 10.
Yeah. So the Griffith Rescue Squad from the Band of the Hawk is leaving for Wyndham, where the castle is. It takes them 3 days to get there. And, of course, most of the characters who have names are in this group. There are many, many members that we don't know their names or anything about them. Those are the guys who die all the time.
Yeah.
The
In
ones
fact,
the readers
spoiler,
know.
they're all going to die.
Right. So then we see Guts, Casca, Pippin, and Judo get in through a secret passage in a graveyard. And it's kind of a nice moment where Guts and Casca have a little argument about how to proceed, and Pippin and Judo can kind of sense the closeness now between Guts and Casca. It's a little different now.
Yeah, I think there's a bit too much flirtiness and lovey-doveyness happening for my taste in these scenes, and it gets worse as we go through the tunnels, but we'll talk about that as we go through. This moment was okay. It's like, oh, okay, the relationship's changed, and Pippin and Judo can obviously tell. Yeah, but it gets kind of worse and swings back and forth as we go through the tunnels. But
and they have someone working for them on the inside who turns out to be Princess Charlotte.
Okay, so I just want to mention this, is that it's been a year since her father tried to rape her. Mm-hmm. And I was a bit surprised, and this is one of those things with this book. I was like, well, why haven't you gotten any reaction to her relationship with her father? Like, she just is acting totally normal. And yet later on, we do get an explanation, and it's good. It's, like, pretty good the way it's handled. Mm-hmm. But it's like a chapter or two down the line. So every time I think Miura is letting me down, he picks me back up again. Like, I think you've dropped the ball on this. But actually, he hasn't. He's got it in mind, and he just comes around to it later sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. So this volume gets pretty scary in places coming up, but also I thought it had more comedy moments than most of the other volumes. There's a bit here where Charlotte recalls meeting Casca before, but didn't realize she was a woman until now. Right. Guts jokes that in the dark, Charlotte mistook Casca for a woman, and Casca whaps Guts in the face with her lantern.
Yeah. There's another great panel, later, much further on, when they're escaping from the tower, from the dungeon. And there's a panel where Guts jumps on a bunch of guys, and heads and limbs are flying in 100 directions in a way that's not rational at all. But then one of the guys is running away saying, "Save me," and it's spelled like Saabbe or something like that. And he's got this little kind of French, like stereotypical French little mustache, twirly mustache, and it's a real Monty Python kind of moment in there, in the middle of all this craziness that I thought was really funny. Yeah.
Casca has some jealousy of Charlotte, and that's even before she finds out why Griffith got in so much trouble.
This is annoying. So Charlotte. Okay, so Charlotte is head over heels in love with Griffith, and that's why she's trying to help these rebels, these bandits, to rescue Griffith from the dungeon. Casca is jealous about Charlotte's feelings. I'm like, okay, is this really necessary? But worse than that, then when Guts ends up piggybacking Charlotte because she can't walk anymore, then Casca becomes jealous of her for her closeness to Guts.
Yeah.
It's like, do we need all of this? Like, pick a side or not have any of it. It's not, I don't feel any of the romantic links that are going on in this series. And I feel like, especially in these two volumes, there was a lot of question about, there was a lot of homoerotic undertones between Guts and Griffith in previous volumes. Mm-hmm. And it seems like in this volume, very clearly, Griffith has gone to Charlotte, Guts has gone with Casca. It's like, okay, the lines are drawn now. Mm-hmm. These are like two heterosexual men. But now we have to deal with all this very silly, feminine, I think what Miura thinks is like feminine jealousy. I think Casca was a really interesting character to me before, without all the silly romantic ideas in her head that now are suddenly, that's all she thinks about. Oh, Charlotte's riding on Guts's back, and she's like, ooh, she's giving her the evil eye. Because this is not what this character was to me when I read her in the previous 9 volumes. She was like a really powerful character that was above these things in this way. You know, petty jealousies, ridiculous jealousies for piggybacking this girl who's fainted.
Yeah. Well, and then you sound like Guts, who's like, why are we wasting all this time when we should be trying to rescue Griffith?
Yes. Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's this old tower that is above the dungeon, and it comes out that heretics were imprisoned down in this dungeon during the Inquisition. So I kind of like the actual historical elements that get mixed in.
I wondered about that, because surely it's an Inquisition, like an Inquisition in this universe. Surely they don't have Christianity in this world.
Well, yeah, we haven't seen any evidence of that. No crosses or anything.
I wondered, that word bounced to me too. Like it really popped off the page because I was like, wait a second, is this supposed to take place in our world to some degree? So I assumed it was just because we do see some sort of Inquisition type of stuff in volumes 1 to 3, where kind of witch trial kind of stuff. So I think it's more something like that was what I had to assume. Yeah. What I really loved here was when they go down to the bottom floor, Charlotte reveals that actually the dungeon was built on top of this huge hole on the ground. And I was like, oh, this is like pits of hell type stuff down here. I was loving this. I loved it when all the supernatural stuff came in. And they accidentally drop did they drop like a torch down there by accident?
Right, and you can see the ruins of that city and a pile of skeletons.
With like a symbol carved on their head, and I think that was the God hand symbol.
Yeah, I didn't remember. I'm going to have to go back and read the first 3 volumes because it's been a while and I've forgotten some things.
But it was definitely like really scary cult stuff going on that I thought was just great. I really loved those bits.
And I think it's a little bit later that after she's on Guts's back that Charlotte explains about the history and about God got angry because this king, who I think this king is the skeleton before he was a skeleton. I
assumed that too.
Supreme King Gyseric.
Yeah, because we get a name and everything as if he's important. Important enough that I immediately wrote his name down because I thought he was going to come into play.
And in battle, he wore a helmet shaped like a skull, and Guts kind of thinks about the skeleton on a horse, and then he thinks, it couldn't be. Which, of course, means it is. But the king ended up heavily taxing people, living extravagantly, and God got angry and destroyed the city. It fell in the hole. And yeah, I think you're right. I didn't put the 5 angels in my notes, or 4 angels, however many angels it was. But the God hand, it all kind of fits together.
Yeah. You were going to mention the cutaway before. This is a good place to talk about. We cut to another scene, which is Rickert, who has stayed behind. I think he's injured. He's injured, so he can't come on the mission with them. But while he's in the woods, he sees an elf fly up out of the lake.
Yeah, a winged elf like Puck, who we saw in the first 3 volumes.
And he says, how can it be at a time like this? Oh, yeah, he thinks it's an enemy raid, I guess.
Well, he it's a little unclear, but yeah, he hears a sound coming through the woods. Okay, well, he's thinking, I saw it. No mistake, that was. And then he hears the ooh-ah from the forest. Yeah. And then thinks an enemy raid at a time like this, and he runs back. And
so there's not a connection between the elf and the raid. Okay.
No, but it's a little unclear. I thought it might be
like birds flying out of trees, like when there's danger or something like that. Okay.
The panel where he hears the sound is so small. I think it needed to be bigger.
Right. Okay.
And so he runs back, and it's just the campfires. Everybody's gone, and it's dark, so he can't really see what else is there. And we go to the next chapter, and this is the creepiest part, where he sees someone hanging upside down, and someone named Kim. I don't think we've seen this character much or at all. And it turns out he's hanging out of the mouth of some really grotesque creature that then swallows him.
Yeah.
And
he says his reaction is, he says that thing can't exist. can't be. That thing can't exist. What does that mean? Because he just saw an elf. So elves are fine. He's like, okay, elves, that's cool. And we've talked about elves before. I think somebody was using elf powder or fairy powder for healing in a previous volume.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow this big creature which eats people can't exist. I'm not sure why. And then he looks up and maybe he doesn't see it, but there's an elf creature, a moth-like creature in a tree watching.
Mm-hmm. And there's some kind of a cockroach or stag beetle creature on top of a pile of skeletons, which I guess is the remains of the Band of the Hawk.
I think there's a few creatures in there, and they're eating. Yeah,
there's some others, like a praying mantis creature, and we get a full page of this elf character who's apparently now full-sized or standing in a tree.
Or is it a different creature? Don't know. Yeah, don't know.
And then the skeleton on the horse shows up.
Yes, the Knight of Skeleton.
Right. And he says, "Withdraw. You shouldn't have time to amuse yourself with slaughter in a place like this. Haste is needed, is it not?" And the other creatures leave. And then Rickard sees the skeleton there next to him, and then the skeleton's gone.
Yeah, and then we see it flying across the moon. It's an amazing drawing. Very amazing image. It looks like he launches off the branch of a tree and then flies across the moon. It's really amazing.
Yeah, like E.T.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Rickard is just left in shock, says this can't be happening. And that's the last we see of him in this volume. So we'll have to see. We probably may not see him again until after the rescue mission is over. Yeah. But everyone's dead. The entire Hawk band is dead at this stage. Now, when the rescue team left, there were a bunch of other people with them. It wasn't just the four of them. And I'm not sure where those guys are waiting for them.
Okay,
but apparently the band is not completely gone. Okay, gotcha. But that was also a little... I mean, we only saw them in the departure scene, and we haven't seen them again. It's just been these four. Yeah. Who are now going down into the hole. And Charlotte insisted on coming along with her maid, Anna. So there are 6 of them going down. I like that character. She's a very minor character, but there was something about her that I quite liked. And she's a little cartoonier than the other characters. Yes. Yeah, definitely. And so they're going down. It's this big hole with the pathway and the stairways going around and around in a spiral along the edges. And this is when Charlotte tells the story of Midland's past and Supreme King Gyseric. And it says it sent 5 angels. Okay. So, yes, but then somebody in the next panel, somebody says, weren't there 4 angels? Oh, yeah. Weren't there 4 of them? Oh, yeah. But what does okay. Yeah, that's was there... Did Griffith replace someone, I wonder? I wonder. Well, we don't know that these 5 angels are the 5 Godhand anyway, but I like this kind of world-building stuff. So I really hope we get more of it, and I hope it's all connected in a way, because it's just so cool to me. Kind of following the breadcrumbs. Yeah. It's just I just hope this is a puzzle that fits together in the end, because it's so cool. By the way, I was wondering if the snarky guy, Corcus, did he get killed by these creatures? We're not sure where he is. That would be unusual for a named character that the audience knows in the Band of the Hawk to get killed. Yeah. Yeah, I guess we'll find out. Yeah, he may be gone. So they get to Griffith's cell, and I love the panel where they're coming down the steps to the landing in front of his door. I just think it's such a great drawing and layout and camera angle on that. It's just awesome. So they get in there, and boy, is he in bad shape. Yeah. He's got no skin on his back, and his hawk helmet has been locked onto his head. Mm-hmm. So
I don't know. Maybe that was part of the torture that they locked him in his own helmet.
His arm and leg tendons are cut. His tongue has been cut out.
Yeah.
Well, we find that out when the torturer shows up, locks them all in the cell, and goes into way too much detail about what he did to Griffith.
Guts noticed some of the stuff first because Guts picks him up and he says his arms and leg and leg tendons are cut. His tongue is cut. This was the moment where Guts surprised me because I'd forgotten that Guts can do anything in the world. They get locked in this cell, which is 4 times as thick as a normal door. The torturer is laughing at them. He's like, "Oh, the guards are on their way. You guys are going to be tortured down here just like he was." And I was like, "How are they going to get out of this?"
Yeah.
And then Guts just ramps through the door with his sword. I forgot he can do anything with that sword. It's really great panel. You'd think that torturer's going to hang around for a while. No, he just kills him off.
Yep.
Pretty big short work of him. This weird little creature, this guy. Pretty great, violent kill. I quite enjoyed it.
Well, it's a little cathartic here, and this is where I was mentioning Guts is really PO'd, and the soldiers come down the steps, and they're just toast.
Cue the title of the series because he goes berserk. This is literally a scene where he becomes a berserker, and everybody notices that he's out of control. They've never seen him like this before. He's so angry at what they've done to Griffith, that he's hacking these guys, and yet Miura has time to have a little Monty Python panel here and there, a little bit of humor, like comedy, the ridiculousness of these heads and limbs flying in every direction with one swing of his sword.
Yeah, and then there are more troops waiting outside the tower, and of course we get the setup here of the commander thinking, "Oh, this 100-man killer story about Guts, that was all exaggerated," and very shortly this guy's head leaves his shoulders as soon as Guts shows up.
Yeah. Yeah. How many times have we seen this with somebody underestimating Guts and then just being hacked up?
Yeah.
And yet it's entertaining every time, I would say.
He says that, and I think, okay, everything's going to be fine because Guts is going to prove him wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then the king shows up and tells everybody to back off for fear of injuring Charlotte. And this king looks worse than ever. He looks like he's aged much more than a year.
Yeah. So, okay, before that, I just want to point out a couple of panels. One is which, like on page 170, as Guts is going absolutely mental, Griffiths is watching. Griffiths is on Pippin's back. He's being piggybacked up. And we just get a panel of Griffith's eye watching him and just the string of ellipses of him thinking. We don't know what he thinks about it, but he's noticing Griffith's violence, extreme violence, more than we've ever seen before in this moment. And there's another moment too where maybe it's a bit later, where, on page 182, in this one, Casca is wiping the blood off of Guts' face. Mm-hmm. And Griffith is watching this. And we get a panel of him looking at them, again with ellipses only, and his eye is narrowed. It's looking at them very sinisterly, like he's jealous.
Or at least he's noticing, just like the other characters did before, that their relationship is different now.
Maybe, but the way it's drawn in that kind of sinister, heavy-lidded way makes me feel like he's not happy about it. But it's hard to say. Anyway, go on. The king has arrived. Right,
and so he doesn't want Charlotte to get injured, so he tells everybody to back off. Then says, summon the Bakiraka. And this is this band of assassins, and a couple of them were wearing turbans. So, here's the Orientalism you mentioned.
Yes. These ones specifically seem more like Indian than Arabian. Maybe it was something in the dialogue. Oh, no, she's wearing a bindi on her head, on her forehead. The female one, yeah. So they're specifically supposed to be kind of Indian characters.
Yeah, definitely.
And I felt like, here's another thing. I mean, Miura surprises me every time. When we had Salat, I guess Salat will come back, but these 5 assassins, I was like, okay, if this was any other manga, this is 5 volumes, right? 1 volume for each assassin. I was like, okay, here we go. He's found a way to insert more action into it. You know, we're going to have very long action sequences now where they have to fight all these guys. They're dispatched pretty quickly, I'd say.
Yeah, just within this volume 10. So well, we'll get to that. But so, yeah, they're working through the castle, and then she wipes the blood off of Guts. And Princess Charlotte is thinking about Griffith and will be together forever and ever. And then the Bakiraka start attacking kind of one by one.
And it's very JoJo's again. They've all got weird weapons and stuff. Yeah.
One of them shoots a poison dart at Griffith, and Charlotte sees it and sticks out her arm and gets hit with the dart. And Guts kills the guy who shot the dart. One of the other guys shows up and says, I'll make a deal with you. Hand her over and we'll guarantee her life because we have the antidote. And, if she dies, then it's going to be pretty bad for us. So they send Charlotte and Anna off with the woman in the Bakiraka group. And then the turban guy says, okay, now we're going to kill you. And there's a fight, and of course the Hawks come out on top.
Yes, and I was actually expecting some of them to get killed on their way out of the tower. I don't think any of them
the Hawks
did. Yeah.
Yeah, well, when they first went into the hole, I was thinking, Charlotte's going to die. I was sure she would, but she gets hit with the dart, and even then she doesn't die.
Yeah, no, but I thought for sure some of the Hawks, because this book generally has a high body count. I thought surely some of them are expendable, but no, they all make it out. By the way, I love the javelin weapon that one of these guys uses. It's got like a kind of slingshot. Yeah. He kind of slings this javelin. It's really cool. Dug that for sure.
So, the only one who survives is the woman, and she gets killed later by the king for allowing Charlotte to get even hit by the dart, even though she survived it. Yes.
But doesn't Charlotte demand of the king that he preserve Griffith?
Yeah, she demands that he lay off of Griffith, and she says, okay, I won't have him killed. I'll just leave him alone. And then as soon as Charlotte's gone, then he says, okay, now we got to call in the Black Dog Knights.
The Black Dog. So immediately, as soon as the Bakiraka are dead, 2 chapters later, okay, now bring in the Black Dogs. I was like, okay, who are these Black Dogs? How many volumes of this is it going to be? 2 chapters or 4 volumes of whoever these Black Dog people are?
Well, I think we've only got about 3 or 4 volumes left of flashback, so I don't think it's going to take that long. Because we need to see Griffith joining the God Hand.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And we meet the head of the Black Dogs called Wild. W-Y-A-L-D.
These guys are supposed to be really crazy. All the regular knights
former criminals
are like, those guys are scumbags. You're calling them Black Dogs? Those people are terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, and we see that Wild is spending his time having sex with multiple naked, attractive women. I'm not sure how you recruit for that kind of activity, but anyway.
No, he doesn't, and he's not quite human. He's some kind of half animal creature.
Yeah, well, at first I was thinking that he might have been, what's his face? But no, he's...
Zod.
Zod, but he looks a little different from Zod.
Well, it's weird because this knight in the narration says that man called Wild, there's something strange about him. He's like a beast. Not he is strange, he is a beast. There's something strange, he's like a beast. But when we turn the page, this guy literally has like a lion face.
Yeah.
Why are we splitting hairs about this? I think he's a beast.
Yes. And someone comes in and tells him that the king has ordered that the Black Dogs need to go after the Band of the Hawk. And Wild says, I have some business with that Hawk boss. Now, does he mean Griffith, I guess, or does he mean Casca?
Well, I wondered about this too. How could it be with Griffith? Because he's been in a torture chamber for a year and wasn't supposed to come out.
Mm-hmm.
So what could his business possibly be with that guy today? He says, I got to take care of a little business today.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, we'll find out. But
we'll find out.
That's the end of Volume 10. So
yeah. By the way, how did the King's Knights know that Guts was with the Band of the Hawk? Because they say the Killer of 100 is with them. Maybe they have spies in the Hawks? I don't know. How else would they know?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe
the land.
Maybe they didn't know that he had left a year ago.
Oh, that could be it. I guess that adds up. Yes, that makes more sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, yeah, definitely lots to talk about here.
Yeah, this one seemed more. I will say, despite all my complaining about the hard to understand dialogue around the talk about dreams and stuff, there wasn't actually that much stuff compared to some of the previous volumes. This is a lot of plot stuff happening here. A lot of got to go here, rescue this person, do this, do that. It's very concrete stuff that happens. There's only a few chapters where people are like thinking about their feelings in a way that it's hard for the audience to understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of action and a lot of getting some action.
Yes,
in these two volumes.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I don't know if I wonder if there'll be cause for that to happen again.
You think there might not be any more sex after this?
There might not be. If there is, like I've kind of tried to justify every scene in the 3 scenes that we had in these 2 volumes. If it happens again, I don't see how it's going to be anything but gratuitous. Like, I can come up with a kind of non-gratuitous explanation, like, oh, they need to be portrayed as vulnerable. We need to have a contrast between beauty versus ugliness or something like that. So it has to be graphic. So I can make excuses this time. If it happens again, I think it will just be there for your 80s nudity kind of thing. Your action, R-rated movie action nudity,
Yeah. Okay, well, we will find out.
Okay.
Berserk by Kentaro Miura is published by Dark Horse. Kumar is the co-host of the podcast Comic Book Movie Oblivion, about relatively obscure movies based on comics. If you're enjoying this podcast, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics. And go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on X, Facebook, or YouTube. Via our site, you can also shop on Amazon to support the show and find links to subscribe to the podcast. You can comment on any episode there or drop us a line at mail@deconstructingcomics.com. And now you can also send us a voicemail. Find the link to do that on the left sidebar of our site. Are you making a comic? Send it to us and we'll do a Critiquing Comics episode about it. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. In the show notes, you'll find a link to our listener survey. We'd really appreciate it if you could take 5 to 10 minutes to give us your opinions of this podcast. 2 years ago, I was joined by writer John Trumbull to discuss Volume 1 of Mike W. Barr and Jim Apparo's Batman and the Outsiders. Next week, John joins me again to discuss Volume 2, featuring the mystery behind Halo's origin, plus stories riffing on Orwell's 1984 and the Los Angeles Olympics of that year, as well as time travel to ancient Egypt. Batman and the Outsiders Volume 2 next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.